Have you ever found yourself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying moments from your past, like old black and white movies? The ones you wish you could change, the words you didn't say, the chances you didn't take, the relationships that ended too soon or lasted too long. Maybe you think about the job you didn't pursue, the family member you grew distant from, or simply the time that slipped away before you realized it was precious. Regret has a strange way of sneaking into our hearts, especially as we get older. It doesn't always knock loudly. Sometimes it just whispers, "What if you had done it differently?" And suddenly you find yourself tangled in thoughts that feel heavier than they used to. But here's something I want to tell you right now. Just because you're over 60 doesn't mean your story is finished. You are not defined by what you didn't do. You are defined by what you choose to do with the time you still have. And healing from a lifetime of regret isn't just possible, it's powerful. In fact, it may be the most freeing thing you'll ever do. Today, we're going to talk about how to start that healing. No complicated therapy talk, no lectures. Just 5 heartfelt steps that can help you find peace, make peace, and live in peace. Because peace isn't a gift that time hands to us. It's something we build step by step, choice by choice. And there's still plenty of time to start. Let's begin where all healing begins, acknowledging the weight you've been carrying. It's not weakness to admit regret, it's strength. You've lived long enough to know the difference between ignoring a wound and treating it. Ignoring regret just lets it fester, but when you look it in the eye, when you sit with it, name it, and accept that it's part of your story, you take away its power to control your future. So many of us were taught to move on too quickly, keep busy, don't dwell. But ignoring regret doesn't erase it. It just buries it deeper, and eventually it shows up in other ways. Bitterness, resentment, self-blame, or sadness that we don't understand. Instead of pushing it away, try this. Sit quietly, maybe with a notebook or just your thoughts. Ask yourself gently, what do I regret most, and what have I learned from it? You might be surprised at how much wisdom has grown from those very things you wish hadn't happened. Once you've acknowledged regret, the next step is forgiveness. And I know that word can stir up a lot of feelings. It sounds so simple when people say it, just forgive. But in truth, forgiveness is one of the bravest acts of love we can offer. Not just to others but to ourselves. Self-forgiveness is where many people stumble. Maybe you've forgiven others but still beat yourself up over your own decisions. Maybe there's a version of you from 10, 20, even 40 years ago that you're still mad at. But think of it this way. You were doing the best you could with what you knew back then. You were learning, you were surviving, you were trying to navigate a world that didn't always make things easy. Would you talk to your best friend the way you talk to yourself? Probably not. You'd tell them, you didn't know then what you know now. And you've grown since then. Well, that same compassion, you deserve it too. Forgiveness isn't saying what happened was okay. It's saying, I will no longer punish myself forever for being human. You are not the mistakes you made. You are the lessons you carry. And when you offer yourself forgiveness, it's like unlocking a door that regret has kept shut for years. Behind it, freedom, lightness, a deep, steady breath you maybe haven't taken in decades. Now, I want to share something personal. A friend of mine, a woman in her 70s, once told me how she lived with the regret of not reconciling with her brother before he passed. For years, she carried guilt. Every birthday she missed, every phone call she didn't return. But eventually, she started writing him letters, not for him to read, but for her to heal. She told him everything she couldn't say, every memory, every sorrow, every apology. One day, she folded the last letter, tucked it into an envelope, and buried it beneath a tree in her backyard. I forgave myself that day, she told me, and I think in some way he did too. That's the power of action, because healing regret isn't just about thoughts. It's about doing something with those thoughts, transforming them into gestures of release and grace. That brings us to the third piece of this path, expression. You'd be amazed how healing it is to simply speak your truth. You can talk to a friend, a journal, your faith, or even the wind. The point is to give regret a voice, not so it controls you, but so it leaves you. You might feel silly at first. Talking aloud to someone who's no longer here, writing letters that no one will ever read. But healing isn't always logical. Sometimes it's deeply emotional, even spiritual. And when you give your emotions, sometimes healing begins not with grand gestures, but with the smallest shift in how we treat ourselves day to day. And perhaps one of the most profound ways we can transform regret is by choosing to live more intentionally in the present. This may sound simple, almost too simple, but for many people over 60, this is the turning point. After years of looking back at past choices, missed chances, lost time, the present can become a quiet stranger. We become so wrapped up in what happened then that we stop noticing what's happening now. But the truth is, the present moment is the only place where peace can grow. And choosing to live in it, even for just a few minutes a day, is how we begin to loosen regret's grip. This doesn't mean you have to suddenly become a master of mindfulness or meditate for hours on end. It simply means learning how to notice your life again. Notice the sun filtering through your curtains in the morning. Notice the way your body feels as you walk. Notice the sound of your breath or the way your hands move as you make a cup of tea. These little moments, when noticed fully, start to become anchors, reminders that life is still unfolding and that you are still here. One beautiful way to practice presence is to create small rituals, acts of mindfulness that remind you daily that today is a gift. You might sit on the porch each morning and watch the birds, or light a candle at sunset and think about one thing you're grateful for. It can be something as simple as tending to a houseplant, or calling a friend just to hear their voice. These moments may not erase regret, but they soften it. They tell your heart, you may not have changed the past, but you can shape today. And that brings us to something even deeper, the idea of making meaning from your past. Because not every regret is meant to be forgotten. Some are meant to be transformed into purpose. Let's say you regret not spending more time with your children when they were young, or maybe you wish you had taken better care of your health earlier in life. The pain of those regrets doesn't have to remain just pain. Instead, you can use it as a guide, a way to help others or to shape your actions now. Maybe you volunteer with young parents and offer them the wisdom you've gathered. Maybe you write your story or share it in a support group, and someone else finds hope in your honesty. Maybe you start walking every day, not out of punishment, but out of love for the body that still carries you. A woman I met once told me that after retiring at 65, she felt a deep sadness she couldn't explain. Eventually, she realized it came from a life of always putting others first and never pursuing her own passions. At 67, she began painting, something she'd loved as a child, but gave up long ago. Her first painting wasn't perfect, neither was the second, but by the 10th, she said, I wasn't painting for art. I was painting for healing. Today, she teaches painting at a senior center. Her regret became her mission. Her past became her paintbrush. So ask yourself, what can I do now with what I know now that turns my regret into something meaningful? The answer doesn't have to be grand. It just has to feel true. And as you do this, I want you to remember something incredibly important. You are still growing. Just because you've crossed into your 60s or 70s or even 80s doesn't mean growth stops. We live in a world that often treats aging like an ending, but in reality, it's a deepening, a refining, a second or third chance to rewrite your story, not with denial of the past, but with deeper understanding and wisdom. You've earned the right to forgive yourself, to be present, to transform, not because time has passed, but because you are still you, still capable, still worthy, still becoming. Now let's pause for a second, not to dwell, but to breathe. Take a slow breath in and out. Just for a moment, give yourself the gift of being here. You are listening to this for a reason. Something in your heart is ready to let go, ready to heal, even if it doesn't quite know how yet. That's okay. Healing isn't linear. It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up again and again with gentleness. And if today you feel like you've been carrying too much for too long, let me tell you something I hope you never forget. There is nothing weak about feeling tired, and there is nothing selfish about wanting peace. You are allowed to rest from the emotional weight of your past. You are allowed to feel joy again, not in spite of your life story, but because of it. So if you've been thinking, it's too late for me, or there's no point in trying to heal now, I want to gently remind you, every moment you spend in peace now is still a victory. Every small release, every kind word to yourself, every deep breath is a seed. And seeds, no matter how old the soil, still grow. Keep watering that soil. Keep reaching toward the light. You're not starting over. When we begin to live more presently and make meaning from our regrets, something remarkable starts to happen. We begin to see ourselves not as broken or behind, but as whole, with all our experiences, joys, and missteps woven into something rich and beautiful. But there's one final piece that often makes all the difference when it comes to true healing: connection. So many people over 60 quietly carry the belief that they have to walk through regret alone. Maybe you've told yourself, no one wants to hear about the past, or it's my burden to carry. But the truth is, connection is often the key that unlocks the heaviest doors. Opening up to others, whether it's a close friend, a trusted family member, a support group, or even a therapist, can be one of the most healing things you ever do. Not because they can erase the past for you, but because they can help you carry it differently. Sometimes just saying something out loud softens its weight. Sometimes just knowing that someone else understands makes you feel less alone. You might be surprised how many people your age or older feel the same kind of regret. Different details, maybe, but the same ache, the same question: did I live well? And when you start talking, not only do you free yourself, but you also give others permission to share their truth too. Healing is contagious like that, and often it's in community that we find the most peace. One man I spoke with in his late 70s told me that for most of his life he regretted not reconciling with his father before he died. That regret stayed hidden for decades. But when he finally shared that story in a senior men's group, something unexpected happened. 3 other men admitted to carrying the same exact pain. They started meeting every week after that. Not to fix each other, but to be there for one another, to listen, to heal slowly and together. What he thought was a solitary wound became a shared doorway to connection. You don't need a crowd. Sometimes one open-hearted conversation can begin to heal a lifetime of silence. So if you're holding on to something, an apology unsaid, a story untold, a truth buried inside, consider sharing it. Not all at once, just one piece, one step. You never know whose heart it might touch, or how it might set your own free. And even if the person you want to reconcile with is no longer alive or unreachable, that doesn't mean healing is off the table. Connection isn't limited to the living. You can speak to them in your thoughts, in writing, in prayer. The act of expressing, of giving voice to what was left unsaid, is still powerful. It still matters, because healing happens in the heart, not just in the conversation. And finally, there is one quiet truth I want to leave you with, perhaps the most important of all. Your life has value right now, not because of what you accomplished, not because of what you regret, but because you are here, breathing, feeling, listening, hoping. We live in a world that often tells us that value fades with age, that after a certain point your story is set, your role is finished. But nothing could be further from the truth. Aging doesn't take away your worth, it reveals it. You've lived, you've endured, you've loved, lost, tried, failed, risen again. There is beauty in every crease on your skin, every gray strand of hair. Not because they mark time, but because they mark wisdom. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are a mosaic of experience, pieced together by time, made stronger by every scar. And if you carry regret, that doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. There's a difference between living with regret and living in regret. One honors your past while still making space for joy. The other traps you in sorrow. You deserve the first one. You've earned it. So take the steps. Keep forgiving. Keep being present. Keep connecting. And remember that healing doesn't erase your past. It allows you to finally embrace it, to see it for what it was. Part of your journey, not the whole of it. And maybe one day, not long from now, you'll find yourself looking back not in regret, but in awe. Awe at how far you've come, at how you kept going, at how, even after all the years, you were still brave enough to begin again. If this conversation meant something to you, I hope you'll share your thoughts in the comments below. You never know who might need to hear your story. You never know whose healing might begin because you chose to speak. And if you found this helpful, I'd be honored if you'd like the video and subscribe to the channel. We talk about real things here, honestly, gently, and with deep respect for every stage of life. Because healing is for everyone. Peace is for everyone. And your best days, they don't live behind you. They live with you in every breath, every step, every moment you choose peace over pain. Here's to living your best life at any age, in any season, and especially now. You are not alone.